Good evening, spiritual warriors. Hare Krishna. Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship at Krishna.com Live. I pray you all are well. I pray that you have found something from these classes that is helping your spiritual growth. This concept of spiritual warriorship as presented by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami is really an exciting concept for growing spiritually, knowing who you really are, your relationship with God, and being able to function and manage in this mad world. As many of you know, anybody new who may not know, these classes are discussions from books by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And he has a number of books, 6 Spiritual Warriors, 6 Reflections on Sacred Teachings, and 4 Beggar books and 2 leadership books. And as I've said, you can get these books on Krishna.com. And I'm also doing a plug for Harinam Press, the publishers. They have a website, harinampress.org. And it's set up pretty nice. It just came up. You can go, and in the books you can see, what is it? You get the table of contents. You can go to a particular chapter, I think, or get an excerpt and really get a sense of what's in the books. And of course order them if you like. So if you haven't read any of his books, please try to start with it. And if you're definitely interested in spiritual life, it's a good way. It'll help you understand this ancient teaching of which we are all hankering for and involved in. Now, it's interesting. Anybody in the chat room right now? No. Okay. It's working this time. Okay. I was going to ask a question. Is that why you're ducking and you're not there? Okay. Last week we began with Spiritual Warrior 3, Chapter 6, A Spiritual Warrior's View of the World. And if you were with me before that, you know my excitement into going there was after Spiritual Warrior 6, the chapter on that he brought up the concept of spiritual warriorship and the necessity for it, and how spiritual warriors are unconventional. So let's return to Spiritual Warrior 3, Chapter 6. And what's interesting, I have a habit, I'm finding, of not marking where I leave off. And yet when I come back and read, it's like it's all new again. Did I read this before? So I'm hoping that you're getting something from this that's helping you in your daily life. Now what we find, if you've been following these, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he usually gives us what's happening, what's causing the distress and the problems right in your face. And then he builds on that and then integrates, brings in solutions to help you move beyond that, transcend it. Now this chapter, he begins with what's going on in the material world. He sort of reminds us of where we are right now. And the title is the chapter, Spiritual Warrior's View of the World. And I'm going to ask you all to bear with me if I seem turning my head and looking. I want to keep you in view and have a face-to-face contact, but if I seem to be moving, I'm trying to get organized. Sometimes I get so excited about this. Okay, so let's start. Where are we now? What he tells us is that there are only 2 categories of happy people in the material world. And all of us here are in the material world. And we may have some visitors from other places, but this is where we are. And the two categories of people are fools and transcendentalists. Now, what he tells us, fools are so oblivious that they manage to convince themselves that they're happy in this material prison. Now, transcendentalists, those who gain spiritual knowledge and who understand that there's something beyond this spiritual world, or begin to understand that this material world is not our home. Transcendentalists are happy because they can see above the material dualities and know that their parole is at hand. That's knowledge, gaining knowledge. They know that there's a way out of this miserable place, this prison as he's calling it. Now everyone is essentially miserable. This is because calamity in the material world cannot be avoided, just as water cannot be avoided in the ocean. So he reminds us again, and if we've been studying, gaining knowledge, or if we've been going through some distress, or just what the heck's going on with my life and all, he's reminding us that the material world is impermanent and constantly changing. Okay? Now, he gives us one of the first skills that we must develop as spiritual warriors. He gives us some skills here, and we went through them last week, but I don't know if you recall, and it was good for me to go through it again. The spiritual warriors, some skills. First is equipoise in the face of constant change and apparent chaos. How does that sound? Constant change. Remember, there used to be a song, I forgot who sang it, but everything must change. Nothing stays the same. And if you're into spiritual life, and if you're in the process of changing consciousness, it means there's definitely going to be change. And also what may appear to be chaos. Now, I'm sure most of you, or all of you, when I said that quality, that skill, equipoise, know what it means or where it is. I still looked it up. Sometimes I like to do that. Equipoise, a balanced state, even balanced, emotionally, intellectually, and mentally. Now, equipoise is also related to the word equanimity. When you think of equanimity, you think of calmness, balance. Well, that in the dictionary, that also gives evenness of mind, especially under stress. And in this day and age, stress is always there. But that word equanimity, I want to take you to the Bhagavad Gita, because that Srila Prabhupada defines equanimity. And let's see what Prabhupada, how he defines it, okay? Equanimity refers to freedom from attachments and aversion. To be very much attached or to be very much detached is not the best, okay? Did you hear what he put in there? To be very much attached, or to be very much detached is not the best. So there comes in that evenness, evenness of mind, especially under stress. So he's saying very much attached or detached is not the best. It must be balanced, even. Srila Prabhupada goes on, this material world should be accepted without attachment or aversion. And what is that aversion? Strong dislike, some call it hate if you like, or distaste, loathing of something or somebody. So it should not, this world, material world, should not be accepted without attachment or aversion. That which is favorable for prosecuting Krishna consciousness should be accepted. And that which is unfavorable should be rejected. So that's when he says the material world should be accepted without attachment or aversion. Okay, and the attachment is that which is favorable for prosecuting Krishna consciousness, and that which is unfavorable should be rejected. Now this is called, when you can do that, this is called equanimity. And you can also say it means being equipoised. The word that Bhakti-tirtha Swami used here as the first skill of a spiritual warrior. Now a person in Krishna consciousness has nothing to reject and nothing to accept save in terms of its usefulness in the prosecution of Krishna consciousness. Okay? Does that clear up that skill mentioned by Srila Krishna Prabhupada? To be equipoised in the face of constant change and chaos, apparent chaos. We must not become overly proud in a moment of happiness. When I read that sentence and was trying in my own mind to be clear, because as I read these books and share with you, I also want to be sure I'm understanding what he's saying and how it can affect my life for spiritual growth and advancement. So what came to me when I read that, we must not become overly proud in a moment of happiness. It took my mind back, and I'm going to share with you, to the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior. Remember those? Those were the first presentation. That was the first presentation we did over a year ago in November 2008. Because last year was 2009, November was a year. Okay, so they're in the archives on Krishna.com. If you didn't go through those 12 qualities, and you feel like checking them, but I'm going to just flip to one or two of them based on these skills, because I found in reading his books and reading, he gives us, he repeats, this is Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, you'll hear something over and over, and repetition is important because of the confusion in this material world. Then we need to hear something over and over, and finally, whoops, it clicks. And once it clicks, then we begin to understand and experience it and have realization. By the way, these 12 qualities, I just at harinampress.org, if you go there and register or sign in for their mailing list or something, you'll get a free gift of these 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior. I don't know how long they'll last. So we're looking at, we must not become overly proud in a moment of happiness. And what I wanted to go back to was the quality on compassion and pridelessness. And what he says is constantly looking for a pat on the back and for people to like us will overshadow our concern for what is right and proper, causing us to lose our higher principles. It is better to be right than it is to be honored. Somehow I went to that when we must not become overly proud in a moment of happiness. Or, the other skill he mentions, or overly fearful in a moment of distress. One of the qualities of a spiritual warrior is fearlessness. See, these qualities come in to help us remember and to help us gain the strength that we need. He tells us in that, of that quality, a spiritual warrior is naturally fearless. What need is there to shuffle our feet when we are backed up by the supreme power? Do you feel that? Do you know that? Do you sense that? Have you accepted that in your studies of this teaching, this philosophy? The supreme power, the supreme personality of Godhead. If you're reading Bhagavad Gita, he's telling you, my devotees never perish. I protect my devotees. So a spiritual warrior is naturally fearless. Now I had to work with that quite a bit. Didn't realize, I thought I understood it until a situation came up and I was asked to do something, and I found myself actually feeling fearful about taking the action I was asked to do. And what happened, I realized what I was feeling. I realized I was hesitating doing it. And this particular quality, having shared it with so many people, came to me. And I started meditating on it. I went back to it and I read it. And I found strength in it. And it said, I have nothing to fear. I've been requested to do this, and I can do it because I am backed up. So these qualities are important to help us grasp who we really are, who we're connected to, and how that connection and what our service, what our duty is service, and how the Supreme Lord reciprocates with us. So he says, how can we be intimidated when our actual origin is divine? When we realize these things, there's no reason to hold on to various crutches, because there's no cause for insecurity. Whew, doesn't that sound great? Okay, I'm not going to go further in that quality, but that line. So you see how important those qualities are. And then he concludes this particular paragraph stating that happiness and distress will come to us of their own accord, for as long as we reside in this realm, material world. And that's when you hear about the dualities. That's the material world. There's dualities. Happiness and distress, you know, fear, fearful, and fearless, and up and down, black and white, and up and down, duality. So just as, again, it's really like a review, and I love reviewing. He tells us that we can develop a genuine spiritual understanding by a careful study and practice of the deeper teachings in the traditions of ancient wisdom available to us. And if you're on Krishna.com, I'm sure you know of those traditional ancient wisdom and the teachings, and you can now download e-books, you know, if you feel you can't buy it, or you can, download something, put it on your iPod, and listen to it. So there's ways of getting this ancient wisdom and hearing it, and as you say, study and practice. And we always say practice makes perfect. So if you practice, it'll become a part of you. So now he's told us what this material world is doing to us and the skills we need in order to move through it. So now he tells us and reminds us that we're not the body. Familiar? If you've been with this teaching. And that's a fundamental premise of spiritual teachings around the world, that we're not this physical body. In the Bible, Corinthians chapter 15 tells us that both celestial and terrestrial realities exist, and that we humans have both aspects within us. This scripture reminds us that while we're in the terrestrial or physical state, we're away from God. You forget. Being accustomed to material existence, we can easily perceive the physical aspects of our being, while our celestial parts are less easy to perceive. However, despite this perceptual difficulty, we must constantly remember that we are not physical beings. What are you talking about, lady? I'm physical, I got this body. Yeah, but listen. Instead, we're not these physical bodies. Instead, we are fundamentally spiritual, transcendental, anti-material entities who are simply using physical bodies as vehicles. Does that help? Is anybody in the chat? No? Few people. Okay. It's working tonight. Okay. Did you get that? We are fundamentally spiritual. Transcendental, anti-material entities who are simply using these physical bodies as a vehicle. Each body is like a garment or a ventriloquist dummy. Without the spiritual spark within, our flesh is absolutely lifeless. That's the knowledge That's the understanding. If you take the time, I usually refer people and go back myself, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. Krishna is giving that to Arjuna. Remember, Arjuna was so confused. He didn't want to fight. He was throwing down his weapon. He wanted to go with a begging pot rather than go on the battlefield. And Krishna says to him, you call yourself an intelligent man, and here you're talking and acting like a fool. Why? Because you don't know the difference between the material and the spiritual. And here Bhakti Tirtha Swami, in 2 pages, 157 and 158, has told us about the material, impermanent and constantly changing, and the spiritual, fundamentally spiritual, transcendental, anti-material. We're simply using this physical body as a vehicle. Those are important points to meditate on, contemplate on. So as you are on the battlefield, because we're spiritual warriors, but remember, our battlefield, as he told us, is consciousness. It's battling the enemies of the mind and changing consciousness. So I found that very impressive. I meditated on that quite a bit after last week's class. So he goes on, and he's reminding us that these senses that we have are unreliable. And he says, how is that? And again now, he's reminding us, we just had the physical body as a vehicle, and this anti-material and spiritual. Not only do we exist separately from our bodies, but also we cannot rely on the senses, he tells us. On our physical senses for accurate knowledge. Our senses are unreliable. And remember the examples he gave. Our eyes are lying to us every single moment. And when he gives the example, if you look in a cup and it looks empty, and yet if you got a microscope and you swabbed it and put it on a slide and look through, you'd see there's some life there. He tells us that our ears are so dull that we cannot hear what's going on 2 rooms away, unless they're hollering and screaming, and then you want them to shut up so you can go to sleep. But ordinarily, conversation going on 2 rooms away, you don't hear it. And you can't even hear the siren and some pitch that dogs can hear that the human cannot hear. And he tells us even when we put clothing on, very often our senses are so dull that they're not even aware of the feel of the fabric. And our sense of taste often leads us, to eat too much and desire foods that are not healthy for the body. So overall, our senses are extremely dull and mislead us constantly. Yet, in all of modern sciences, we continue to claim to have made definitive observations, knowing full well that all of our tools are flawed. It is crucial for us as spiritual warriors to understand that we have a non-physical essence that is eternal, has a mission, and is looking for ways to love and serve. It is crucial, he says, crucial for us as spiritual warriors, and that's what we're here, on a mission, to understand that we have a non-physical essence that is eternal, has a mission, and is looking for ways to love and serve. We could go back to when we did Spiritual Warrior 2. I'm sorry now I didn't keep like a table of contents or a calendar when we did certain chapters in books, so I could say on such and such a date or so and so. But anyway, you'll find it if you go back to the archive. The first chapter we did in that book was called The School of Love, remember? And he's stating, giving us the same concept of who we really are. And he tells us there that the soul is made for love. That's who we are, spirit, soul, within this body. I remember in reading and going through these senses, in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's stated in Bhagavad Gita and in Bhagavatam, the story of Maharaj Ambarish, who used all his senses for the Lord. Really, remember, he used his eyes to go to the temple to see the Lord in the deity form. He used his ears to hear about the Lord. He used his legs to walk to the temple to see the Lord. And he used his tongue to taste prasadam. Okay? So we have these senses. We're in this physical body. And we have these senses, but rather than letting them be mundane or go about, we can use them at a higher level while we're still in these bodies. So the next I think we were to go to this week is about ecstasy. Now, one of the fundamental premises in almost all spiritual paths is that human beings seek a deep experience of ecstasy. Everyone wants pleasure. We all want a natural high. What was that? Was that in Chant and Be Happy? I think George Harrison wrote the foreword for their, what was it, Stay High Forever? Something in the early days like that. Everybody was running, yeah, I want it. If we have not experienced the joys of a higher taste, we tune in to a lower one. But we are never quite content with such a solution. Why? Because the senses are insatiable.
Insatiable.
Insatiable? Oh, okay. Yeah. What does that mean? Never satisfied. Now, indeed, we simply become more and more locked into the cycle of desire. The more drugs we take, the more we need for the same stimulation. The more sex we engage in, the more we want. Rather than quelling our desires, excessive sexual activities agitate the senses to a point where normal sex will not do. Under proper circumstances, however, even a sexual encounter can be highly spiritualized. If we want lasting pleasure, we should consciously check our lower impulses and seek highest pleasure of all, which is genuine loving relationships and caring and God-centered. God must be in the center of all relationships. Now he tells us naturally we're all searching for ecstasy. We have an innate desire to feel such ecstasy because, like the Lord, we are pleasure seekers. And we are part and parcel of the Lord. Therefore, we have the same qualities of the Lord in minute amounts. If we do not experience these higher pleasures through spiritual activities and spiritual absorption, we will inevitably turn to artificial means. And this turning to artificial means requires that we break the laws of God that have been conveyed by great prophets. In so doing, we incur various individual and collective karmic reactions. We also deprive ourselves of genuine, lasting fulfillment. Sublime ecstasy is the birthright of all human beings who seek divinity. And that's what the human body is for, that we're in a human body. It means we have the intelligence and that desire for the highest. And that we're here in this material world where we can see the mess and the confusion and realize it's not our home. We're told by the prophets and ancient teachers it's not your home. And we're having this desire for divinity. So that's why, as it goes back to what he told us a short while ago of spiritual life, to seek and study and practice from the ancient wisdom that's available to us. He tells us we must make an effort to discover the ecstasy by releasing the attachments and desires of our limited egos. Seek and ye shall find. Sounds familiar? Yeah, been around. Seek and ye shall find is a well-known phrase that refers to this search. But we must always remember that the goal of the search has nothing to do with temporary material treasures. That phrase brings me to a remembrance somewhat of my path. Seek and ye shall find. What is it? Knock and it shall be open. But that seek and ye shall find, I remember vaguely many years that seeking, knowing there was something higher than what I was going through in my life. As he says, we must make an effort to discover the ecstasy, but all human beings seek divinity. And I began a search. It took me, over hills, down dales, and in the mountains, retreats everywhere. And kept going and seeking. And even to those of you who know my story, going to live in a spiritual community in Uganda, East Africa. They were strict vegetarians and all. But somehow the Lord brought me back. I won't go into that whole story. And when I returned to America, and I call myself, I was homeless because I gave up everything to go and live in Uganda. And I was living with my daughter, brought me home to live with her. And I remember just at some point saying, all I want to do is know God. And that was that desire of seeking the divinity. And from that point, it was almost mystical or mysterious. I was still going from one spiritual group or another spiritual group listening, and each time I just didn't feel satisfied. And then I found the devotees of Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and there was a meeting, and it was called the Institute for Applied Spiritual. That attracted my attention. And I went, and when I heard him speaking, which later I realized he was giving us Bhagavad Gita, but he was giving it in a palatable way for those of us who have been seeking and some of us who thought we were pretty spiritual. But there was a difference. There was a sense that all I could say, my phrase was, my soul is hearing what it wants to hear. So when I read the seek and ye shall find, if the desire is there, you will certainly find. But he says we must always remember the goal of the search has nothing to do with temporary material treasures. Jesus said that we should build our riches in the kingdom of heaven. Even Benjamin Franklin said, those who seek temporary shelter above their basic liberties deserve neither. If we want to actualize the fullest potential of our species, a species that has been given dominion over everything on this plane, we must trust in and act on the words of the Lord and his representatives, or we do ourselves a great injustice. So let me stop here and see, are there any questions, comments? No? There's somebody there? There are people there? Greetings, whoever's out there. Is Bhuvan Mahan there? No? Oh. Okay. No questions, no comments? Is anyone there who has been listening, coming, I guess listening, seeing me over the past couple weeks or so, who could share maybe some concept, aspect, idea, thought that you've received from this reading, that you've been meditating on, endeavoring or making an effort to implement in your life, or put in practice in your life to try? Anyone? Any feedback? Everybody shy? Okay. Think on that. Think on that. It's not the test. Won't take away your computer. I guess it's still, when I began with this, I remember I used to say, and it says in the scriptures even, you do your best and not worry about the results. So I know you're out there and you're on the chat room, and that means, are they listening or chatting with each other? They're listening. All right. And just think about what I put out there. If you think about it, and if you don't want to share it in the chat room, last week I was courageous enough to give my email. You can send it to me. I'd really like to know, has any of what you've been hearing helped you in any way? Because that's the whole idea of Bhaktitirtha Swami. These books, they're from lectures that he gave that were, transcribed and then put in written form to share this with you, to help you in just the basics that we spoke on tonight. Knowing that the material world is temporary, but knowing that you are more than that. I like that. I still haven't held it in my head. But we are fundamentally spiritual, transcendental, anti-material entities who are simply using these physical bodies as a vehicle. Have you got it? Yes.
Mayapur shares, I have particularly been working on tolerance.
Tolerance. Okay. That's good. How's it coming? Are you more tolerant? And when you're working on something, you're going to have to be tested. It's like being in school. If you're studying algebra for whatever, math or science or whatever, you have to take a test. So that's great. And the Lord loves us so much that he will give tests. And tests are just to see if you're qualified, and then you can pass on to the next stage, the next class, the next adventure, because you don't want to get stuck in one. So see how the tests are coming so you can practice, put it into experience in your life, and then move on to the next. Okay? And we've covered, he's, just given us so much here. I didn't want to start another section, but maybe I'll give a little bit more, and then any other questions? No comments? Nobody wants to answer my question? Okay. I'm not going to be mad at you. Human beings have an innate longing for freedom, for liberation from the constraints and limitations that keep us bound to suffering. What came into my mind when I read that? I thought of my teenagers, and any of you we were all teenagers at one time. In fact, my own teenage. Where what do we want? Freedom. We want to get out of that house. We want to get out of our parents' rules, regulations, and what have you. So that's an innate longing. I just remember, wow, I went way back a moment ago. Of course, I didn't think of running away from home. Like, as the years went by, these kids would pack a bag and go. But anyway, that's a part of our nature, longing for freedom. And we want to be free from the constraints and limitations that keep us bound to suffering. And that's us in this material world. We also have a deep hunger for community and loving relationships. Yet, the global increase in homicide, suicide, ecocide can be traced to the fact that we have lost the understanding of how to coexist with one another on this planet. In our unguided quest for freedom, we have forgotten what this freedom actually means. Freedom is not just a matter of dominating nature and forcefully extracting riches from her. Freedom is a matter of living in harmony with other living beings, and with Mother Nature. Because when she is pleased with us, her trees are laden with fruit, and she bestows a wealth of plants, edibles, foliage, and healing herbs. What goes through your mind when you hear that? I know what went through mine. When she is pleased with us, Mother Nature, her trees are laden with fruit, and she bestows a wealth of plant, edibles, foliage, and healing herbs. I just saw a headline on the news section. I don't watch TV news. I don't turn the radio on. And I'm almost ducking the news when I go on the computer. It's just been so horrible. But every now and then I get a headline or a look. And I just saw where in Europe they had to close airports and flights because the ash from a volcano, look how quick I've forgotten, there's a volcano that's spewing out. I forgot what country where it's located. But people can't travel. It's terrible. And what do you think? Mother Nature's telling us how many earthquakes have there been. And they're getting bigger and stronger. How many tsunamis? How many? So, when she's pleased, okay. When she's not pleased, he goes on that our true liberation will not come through domination of the earth, nor will it come through social reform. It is not a matter of replacing one material system with another, of valuing one race over another race, of affiliating with one political party over another. What we must alter is the tendency in each of us to dominate, manipulate, and exploit. The tendency in each of us. We have to study ourselves. And we must also check our attempts to hoard and to trick nature by grabbing more than our proper share. Ultimately, we must aim at purifying our own hearts and consciousness so that we can so that we can in turn purify the atmosphere around us. Remember that expression? If it's to be, it's up to me. So he's telling us we must aim at purifying our own hearts and consciousness so that we can in turn purify the atmosphere around us. And if we've been following these readings of these spiritual warrior books, he gives the process, the technique, the technology for doing that in every single one. He goes on, then, and only then, can we leave the realm of limitations and re-enter the eternal reality, the kingdom of Mother, Father, God. So that's enough to think about for a week. And you'll come back next week excited, rejuvenated, purified, and knowing who you are. Huh? You are fundamentally spiritual, transcendental, anti-material entity. who are simply using your physical body as a vehicle. Think on that. Work on that. Remember what we've covered. He's given us so much to become strong spiritual warriors in this prison house, as he mentioned. Okay, anybody just want to say hello or good evening or anything before we close? No? Who's there? Anybody I know?
Dr. Patrick.
Dr. Patrick. Hi, Haribol.
Mayapur.
Mayapur. Okay, I need to talk to you.
Venerito. Somebody.
Who's that?
Venerito.
Oh, where are you from? Benelito?
Venerito.
Okay. You knew? I don't remember that name. Have you heard that name before? Is this your first time? You feel like answering? Where, at least where you're located? I'm curious about that. No? Anybody else?
He's from Russia, but he lives in USA.
Where in the USA?
New Jersey.
Ah, welcome. I don't remember your name if you've been here before. I'm glad you're there. Anybody else we know? No? Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. You've gotten some pretty important points for growth, and that's what spiritual life is about. So grow and sprout. Spring is here. The flowers are budding and all. Let your consciousness glow and grow and become purified, as he said. And you can do that by hearing, chanting, remembering, okay? And just following some of these things. Thank you all for coming. I hope to see you next week. Hare Krishna.